Hello, everyone.
Hi, everyone.
Welcome to the Youth Action Update webinar. My name is Elizabeth Perez, and I am from All Chicago. I am one of the project managers for the Youth Homelessness Line of Action. And with me,
Hi, I'm Carrie Moy with DFSS, and I am the other co-lead of the Youth Line of Action.
So thank you all for joining us today. We have quite a couple of updates that we want to share with individuals that have happened since the last time we joined. So the first one, and the exciting one, is that Chicago was awarded the Grand Challenge. So yay! So we are one of 10 communities that have accepted the challenge on how do we end and prevent youth homelessness for youth who identify as LGBT and youth of color. So we are going to form the second cohort. So that just means that we will begin the work with Away Home America and all of the technical assistance providers in early 2020. So the nice thing is that we have a couple of months, so to speak, to just kind of finish up some of the current projects that we are about to embark upon to begin the Grand Challenge. We do want to say a special thank you to Erin, Nicole, and Chris for joining us on an impromptu interview with Away Home America on a video cam, which is always a little bit intimidating at first, but we do thank you for kind of just lending your schedule to join for that interview, which got us that night's one of those 10 spots. Great.
Thank you.
So the other thing that we will also be starting is a 100-day challenge. So it's another challenge that we have. We've been talking about it in the last couple of months. We knew that we had anticipated an earlier start, but we are actually anticipating the official launch date in late October. So as soon as we have more details about it, we'll join. We'll send that out so everyone is aware of it. That will be happening. So we do have a system design leader workshop that is happening in the next coming weeks in September. So we'll be having some of our executive directors from systems and organizations that join us that will be setting up the parameters as to what our goal may be, and also identifying some of that frontline staff that will form part of the 100-day team. So the 100-day team will be the actual team that identifies the goal for us to work within 100 days, but the system leaders are just going to be pretty much indicating what are those parameters and also really identifying their staff that can commit the time to this 100-day challenge. So we're super excited. We've had lots of very intentional conversation with the youth leadership team about what are some of our possible goals. So we're super excited as to what we may land on and really looking forward to working with Rapid Results Institute to really put these things into motion. All right, and the other just kind of general update for our communities. So many of you may have heard round 3 of the Youth Homelessness Demonstration Program announcements were announced probably like a week and a half ago, like the last week in August. Unfortunately, Chicago was not selected as a YHDP community. We do know that HUD will be releasing a debriefing document within the next couple of weeks or so. Just letting us know how Chicago scored, and will be followed by a general debriefing, national debriefing that always gives kind of just some general guidance as to where communities lost points or gained points. So between Carrie and I, we'll be doing an analysis of what that debriefing shows and how our score fared out. We have heard that there will be a 4th round of YHDP before the end of 2019. So we look forward to whether HUD announces those, but we will be doing some thoughtful analysis on our application and seeing if there can be some strategies that we can put into place to continue. Hopefully one day we will be a YHDP community. All right. So now I'll turn it over to Carrie to talk about a little bit about youth and data.
Great, thanks. I don't know if anyone has any questions. Elizabeth just shared a lot of information there, so please feel free to, I think you can raise your hand, and we have few enough people on here, we might even be able to give you audio. I'm not seeing anything pop up, but I'm not sure how this thing works.
Great, yes. So as usual, if you have any questions or want to share any comments, you can feel free to raise your hand. We don't have a whole lot of topics today, so we can open up the lines. Everyone is muted, but we can open up the lines and we can chat. If you don't have a working mic on your phone, you can always feel free to use the call-in option. Or if you do not want to hear your voice on the webinar, you can always feel free to use the chat box on the right-hand side to check in any, type in any questions that you may have for us.
Great. Now, we are all bummed about YHDP, but we're moving forward anyhow, because that's what we do. So I wanted to talk about the youth data work group, and I believe somewhere you have the ability to download the sheet of questions that we're going to talk about here. I don't know, Elizabeth, can you give them advice on how to find that?
Yeah, so on the right-hand side, where you see kind of all the audios, you should see one of the headers that says handouts. Just make sure that you click on that. There's actually two handouts there. So one is about proposed additional intake questions. So that's the document that Carrie will be jumping into. And the second one, the Y program model standards one pager, we'll be going into that in a little bit.
Great. So we're going to jump into that, though, the one pager about the new intake questions. Can you open that for me? So I want to give you like a general idea of why we're talking about this. The Youth Data Work Group has been working with Chapin Hall now for about a year, I think. And Chapin Hall originally had come in to do a typology, and they were going to look at our HMI data and help us better understand the youth that we serve and how they move through our system. But what we found when they started that analysis is that we don't have enough information about young people, and we don't have consistent information about young people. Because, you know, young people touch all parts of our system, not just our youth providers. Also, with youth providers based on funding, they're answering different sets of questions. So it's very hard for researchers to do an analysis when we ask two questions in two different ways and we only ask them to some percentage of our population. So the idea is, and what we've been working with the Youth Data Work Group, is to add those additional questions on the intake assessment. And that is the thing that you do when you first come into any CoC service. So you first touch shelter, you do it. So one question that we've already added was a question about sexual orientation. Not the T, because transgender is captured in gender, but we already added a question about sexual orientation, and that was so that we could look at equity in our system. Now we've moved to the next set of questions that we want to ask, and these are more focused on aligning us with USICH and federal outcomes around youth homelessness. And there are, I think, 5 categories that these benchmarks fall into. And of those, you know, we already have some of them. Like we have good information about where were youth staying before and their housing situation. So we didn't need to add questions about this. So if you, can we scroll down so we can see the domains where we are looking at questions? We can skip that part, sorry. 2 people working, 1 computer. So the main things that we're focusing on are education, employment, permanent connections, and then this one that doesn't have to do with USICH, but we felt was a really big data gap, was pregnancy and parenthood. So we can start at the top. Yeah, thank you. So I don't think I need to read these questions to you, but I will say we are taking them to different groups. Like we took them to a focus group of youth at Center on Halsted, And we're working to put together a webinar so we can talk to frontline staff who actually have to ask these questions of people, like young people and adults. These new questions will be added to the intake assessment for everyone. And that's just about wording, and do we have enough answers to capture everyone's experience? But we also want to balance that with, like, we don't want to ask too many questions because that's not why people come in for service, and we don't want to give too many answers because then it makes it very difficult to look at the data on a scale.
Yeah, so I think one thing to add is that, you know, these questions will be seen for any program that participated in HMIS, because HMIS is kind of the platform that we use for most of our programs here in Chicago to collect client-specific information. Now, we know that adding 8 questions can be a lot for any program, and we wanted to be very intentional as to why now. We wanted to align ourselves with the rollout, with the HUD standards, you know, elements that we're going to be rolling out in October. So we know that a lot of our programs are prepping for that. They're working with HMIS on updating intake forms, to see any, you know, slight changes that HUD may be issuing out. We just wanted to make sure that we were conscious of that and also align ourselves with that rollout, so that way programs don't have to, you know, redo their intake process in a couple of next month, or redo the training for their intake providers. We know that's a very huge lift for our service providers, so we wanted to make this as easy at the service provider end. And also we wanted to make sure that we wanted to, you know, we do make ourselves really try to capture additional data to help us analyze, you know, how our young people are flowing through our system, to really help us do that analysis on what interventions are needed, what tweaks do we have to make in our system in order to feed the needs of young people that are experiencing homelessness. So, you know, we do want to say we understand that adding, even if it is just 8 questions, it's a lot, right? Because we understand that that may make the intake process a little bit more longer. But, you know, we hope that you're able to also join us to give us that feedback in those webinars, to let us know. The members are part of the youth data work group, as well, and also other youth service providers like Centro and Hostel, La Casa Norte. We have Urban Labs and Heartland also join us.
TLP, Ignite. Sorry about that.
Yeah, so we know that it's only a very small subset of our service providers, so we want to be intentional to reach out to, you know, all our other service providers who go and do this as well, to let us know if there's anything that we're missing. You know, we want to know this right now prior to actually implementing it. So if you have some of your staff, you know, it will be recorded as well. So hopefully, you know, you'll be able to join us on the webinar. If not, they can always feel free to send their feedback. We're always open to collecting that. We just want to do this in a very thoughtful way for all our service providers.
Yeah.
All right.
No, that was great. No, that was important stuff. So I just wanted to walk through these questions with you so you know, kind of, you have an idea of what we're asking. And they do look long when you see all the response options, but I think the questions themselves are pretty straightforward. So in education, we're hoping to capture whether someone is enrolled in school. And then the second part of this question is, what is the highest grade that they've completed? I think we do have some wording finesse things to work on here that came out of the focus group. So these might change, like, in small words as you see them, because we keep doing a refinement. For employment, we're trying to capture someone's employment status and also how long they have been employed. And then one thing you'll see in both of these sections is that we also are looking to capture if someone's in a training program or an employment training program. So you see those in both education and employment space, and we're right now trying to work on that to make that more clear. And we are working with Carrie Thomas has given us some feedback from the CJC, and that hasn't been incorporated into this yet. So this will get more clear as we work on it. But that would just to capture employment. And then I think what's interesting here and what we build into these questions is that they're very simple questions, but over time, as young people touch different services in the system, we will hopefully be able to see that they're making an improvement in these categories, which is how we would be aligning with the USICH benchmarks, is that we can now see if, if we have enough services around employment and people are able to gain employment or to take the next step. And the same thing with schooling. Then we go into permanent connections. And right now, this is the question we settled on. It's pretty simplified, but as I think it's a good place for us to start, and we will keep refining it. The one thing you're not going to see in here is, what was that? Well, the healthy condition.
Healthy connections.
Yeah. So there's another USICH benchmark component about wellness and healthy connections.
Social emotional
well-being. That's it. Thank you. Two brains together. And we couldn't decide on one question or even two questions that could actually capture that information. And I think that's a conversation that's happening. So we're just keeping an eye on that conversation. And if there is a national standard set up for that, we would then incorporate that later. But because we want to be conscious and not add questions we don't know how we're going to use, we haven't included that here. So if you see that missing, that's why. And then separate from those benchmark questions, we are asking about pregnancy and parenthood. And these changes came out of like a lot of what we're hearing from young people, but also the Voices of Youth Count, that we have a lot of parenting men in Chicago, and we don't capture that information very well right now. So these were modified to change so that we aren't just capturing parenting information about women, we're also capturing it about men. So the first question now says, are you currently pregnant, or do you have a pregnant partner? And that would be the change there. That first, we weren't really asking people if they were pregnant in an organized way, which is an important question when you're housing somebody, but also the pregnant partner part. And then, are you a parent, and do you have your children with you? And you will see that these questions are designed to capture like a point in time. So we're not asking like if you're planning to have a child or if you're planning to adopt, because we want to capture what is happening right now so that we can see changes over time as your answers to these questions change. And I think that's important. Oh, you will notice that some of these questions look very similar to other questions that you're asking already, and that's probably because in the youth world we have supplemental assessments for RHY and for DFSS funded programs, and we took these questions from there and kind of revised them from that point. The idea being, hopefully, you won't have to answer a question twice for these different assessments.
Yeah, so I think like one of the things that we landed on, either some of those assessments didn't capture the entire data that we wanted, all the options that you see on this handout, or it was slightly just slightly different. Like I think like, are you pregnant, which only geared, was only geared to women and really not capturing men. So although right now we are not in the place that we can change any of those HUD standards, and we are not encouraging that you kind of ignore those questions, not fill it out. That is not what we're proposing.
Yeah.
We just want to make sure that we also are conscious of capturing that additional data points. And hopefully we can once we collect that information, we can make that argument to HUD, because we feel that these data points are very important and crucial as we continue to analyze our data and make strategies and implement new interventions and so forth, that HUD should recognize that. But until we get there, it might work a little bit more on, it might sound duplicative, but I think like some of the training pieces,
any of HUD questions.
Some of the training pieces will kind of address those if you do feel like some of the questions sound slightly the same or something. We'll make sure that we are making some very clear training pieces about that.
Yep. And so I think the important part here is that these will be for all CoC programs, shelters, drop-in, housing, all of it. And that is because youth touch all part of our system. And if they weren't in a program that had to do a supplemental assessment, we weren't capturing this information about them. So now we will be. And we also think for the whole system as a whole, thinking about these USICH benchmarks and how we can track and understand them is important for our system as a whole. So while this came up in the youth line, and because we had this amazing opportunity to work with Chapin, we think that what we've learned can work for everyone and how we provide resources.
So I think, like, kind of next steps for this, Carrie and myself, and Beth included, we're kind of taking our show on the road, for lack of better words. So we'll be going to a couple of different work groups that exist in our continuum of care, just to share what this is. We do know that this is a big ask. It might not be such a big thing for our youth providers because we've all been aware of this, we understand, and we've been part of the conversation up to now. Unfortunately, that doesn't speak to everyone in our continuum, and because we felt it was very important to roll it out to the entire system and not just the subset of, youth providers. We are going to be talking with people in different work groups about how did we get here and why do we think this is important. So if you feel that you are a part of a work group that should hear this conversation, feel free to reach out to us. Let us know when the next meeting date, if we're able to get on their agenda. We want to be as transparent as possible with the entire community as a whole, but we'll also be, as we mentioned earlier, hosting a webinar. We'll be sending out additional information about like the time. So, feel free to share the message. Feel free to download, the intake kind of handout that we provided, just so that kind of what is weren't able to join us today. All right.
Thank you.
So any questions on that? Give a moment.
It might be on the screen. There we go. Hi.
All right. It doesn't sound like we have any more questions on that, but we do tend to go a little bit quick, just because it's just me and Carrie talking. So that tends to happen when we're the only ones on the call. All right. Our last topic that we wanted to talk about that Carrie and I are pretty excited about, because it's been months in the making, is the Chicago Youth Sector Housing Program Model Design. So for many of you who joined us in the community conversation a couple of months ago, where we shared the draft of the work that we have been doing with ICF regarding our youth housing models. Now, because the conversation is only geared for those program models that have a housing and bed component, so it means you actually have a physical bed and a unit with that program associated, that we would be able to speak to. It doesn't cover any of those supportive services only programs, so maybe that's 2020 kind of task.
Not because they're not important, just we had to pick a doable amount of work, and we had identified in the blueprint that this maybe was where we needed to look first.
Exactly. So because we do know that many of you may have seen it, maybe have started reading the document in pieces, like by chapters, because it is a pretty lengthy document. We do know that it is sometimes a lot to ask to read a 34-page document and then give us some feedback. So Carrie and I have a whole lot of fun time reading large, long pieces of document like that, but we won't do that to everybody. So in case you haven't read it but still want to get kind of a gist of what that document is, we created a one-pager. But our target audience was very much geared for the Systems Performance and Evaluation Committee. So that is a work group under our Continuum of Care governance structure that really looks at how our system is performing. And they also create the local evaluation process and tool for our HUD CoC funded partners. So we wanted to be intentional on sharing kind of what our document was. And because this group is tasked with developing the written standards for our community, so that document is going to take place of what we know our Chicago program models. So we wanted to make sure that anything that we are proposing, even though our document speaks to aspirational pieces, and we know there's a lot of work and action steps that need to go into that, it does, when we're looking at community written standards, that even though we're stating the minimum for each of those program models, we are doing it with the lens of, is that minimum too low for what we are anticipating with our program models for youth? So that is, we went on Friday, so we just went to spec to kind of just share what we were doing, because although we know very well and have been talking about this for numerous months, doesn't mean that the entire community as a whole knows everything that we've been working on and knows the ins and outs. So our first stop was just to kind of share what this document was, and really to be very conscious that this document will not be overriding anything that is in the written standards, but how do we marry the two of them, right? How do we make it clear to anyone new coming into our system and is doing this work, can pick up the written standards or can pick up our housing model design and say, okay, I need to go and reference either the written standards, or if they're reading the written standards and want to look at, like, let's look at aspirational. We're ready, our agency is ready to go down that route. What does that look like? And what does the community expect? And they can refer to the youth housing model design document. Again, if you know of any work groups, or if you want us to come and chat with your organization about kind of those specific program models, we're more than happy to do so as well. The youth leadership team, we have kind of divided and conquered, so all of our members kind of took a task of some of those key considerations, because we know that a lot of the stuff in the document, speaks to funding, right? We may look at scaling up specific models as far as services and other items, and that requires a cost, right? So we know that none of those changes in the documents is an easy switch. It's not that programs can easily make those switches, by tomorrow. So we know that there's a lot of work and action steps that we have to work on. So that's what our youth leadership team is, to really identify what those steps are, and then plot it out on a timeline, right? Because it is, we may be small, but we can't really do everything, between now and the end of the year. So we also wanted to make a very realistic timeline as to when of those changes we can anticipate start to work on and implement.
We're also working with Nikki, our consultant on that project, to look at the broader work that has to do to implement this, like modeling our system, but also all the other work that we have on our work plan and how we can bring the two together. So how do we integrate the next step for this process in with all the other work we have going on, so that we have one work plan that we can move forward with and also present to this group. Hopefully we'll have it ready to share at our November meeting. That's our goal right now.
So a couple things about just the handout that we referenced. So again, it is geared for spec, so you'll see a lot of spec questions, but we wanted to make sure that we pulled out some of those key changes that we identified. So they knew, right, they wouldn't have to read the entire document and pull those out. So if you're kind of, and we went by all the program models that we discussed. So, if you're really interested, if one of those catches your eye, you can feel free to read more in depth into the youth housing model design document to kind of really get a full understanding of the entire model. But this one pager was really designed to capture some of those things that we felt were important to put on their radar as we continue to move forward.
And also, there are some missing from this document, and spec is strictly concerned with what is now. So the things that we're thinking about in the future that aren't that don't exist right now, we didn't bring that to spec because it's not what they're there for.
Right, exactly. Very cool. Yeah, so don't worry, it's not that we've just kind of ignored some of those housing models.
It was just for spec.
It was very intentional to look at what are existing models today, and hopefully, when we get more funding, we can look at some of those new aspirational models.
Absolutely.
So again, if you have any questions, you can always feel free to reach out to me and Carrie, and we're more than happy to talk about that conversation further with you.
That's all we had for this short webinar, but if you guys have any questions, we're happy to answer them. If we missed something that you were dying to talk about. Elizabeth is working the computer parts of this now.
So if you have any questions, you can feel free to raise your hand, and we can call upon you and unmute the lines. If not, if you want to just go ahead and type your question in the chat box, we can read it out loud and provide a response.
And if nothing, that's okay too.
Yep, you can always feel free to email us later.
I never know how long to wait. My impatience here is hard to tackle.
You know, I'm a like slow typer sometimes, so I
You understand. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you know, and then I want to make sure that it's not misspelled, and if I'm rushing, I misspell more. So I always like to give people a minute for that typing.
I misspelled experience and put exercise, so we had people exercising homelessness. One of the things I just presented to the group today. It's awful.
Wow.
I'm just sharing that with everyone now.
Yeah, so, well,
we all make typos.
Exactly.
All right.
All right. Well, it doesn't seem like we have any questions coming in. So we thank you for your time, and we look forward to talking to you again in October when we'll probably be in the midst or about to actually officially jump off on the 100-day challenge. So it's exciting. We've been talking about this, it feels like, for the entire year now.
Yes.
So we're actually excited to do something.
It has been,
right? It has been.
Yeah.
So we look forward to sharing more as to what the goal will be and how you can become involved. You know, we have followed other communities, so we're super excited to be part of this cohort along with Santa Clara and New Orleans.
That's right.
Yep. So those are the two other communities that we will be joining the 100-day challenge. So we look forward to working with them and knowing about our fellow communities in those parts of the United States. And we look forward to you also participating and sharing.
Yeah, thank you.
Right,
Thanks for joining us. Thanks for watching.